heard laughter from the living room. My daughter raised her glass and said, "Finally free from that burden!" Everyone cheered. She didn't know I was standing right behind her. The next morning, she knocked on my door begging. But what I did next left her speechless. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. I stood frozen in my own hallway. The wood floor was cool under my bare feet. From the living room, the sounds of my daughter's party washed down the corridor. The murmur of voices, the sharp pop of a cork, laughter. I had just come from the kitchen, carrying a tray of clean glasses I thought they might need. I was about to push the door open with my shoulder when her voice cut through the noise, clear and commanding. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" The chatter died down. I stopped moving. The door was ajar just enough to show a slice of the room, a blur of colorful dresses, the edge of my own sofa. I saw the back of Chloe's head, her perfectly styled hair catching the light. "I just wanted to say thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate my promotion," she said. Her voice was warm, practiced. "It means the world. And, well, I have a bit of news to go with it. I finally signed the lease on that amazing loft downtown, the one with the river view." A wave of congratulatory sounds rippled through the group. My grip tightened on the tray. She had told me she was looking at places, but she hadn't mentioned signing anything. She hadn't mentioned a party tonight either. She had asked if she could use the house because it had more space than her apartment, and I had said yes. I had spent the afternoon cleaning, arranging platters of food I'd paid for. "But that's not even the best part," Chloe continued, her tone lifting into something brighter, sharper. "The real news is, I'm finally free." Another cheer. Someone called out, "Free from what?" Chloe laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound I knew she used for audiences. "From the ultimate guilt trip, from the endless, smothering obligation. You all know what I mean. The daily check-in texts, the just dropping by with food I never asked for, the constant quiet expectation that my life is somehow her project." The air left my lungs. The tray in my hands became a foreign object, heavy and stupid. "So, as of next month," she announced, her voice rising in triumph, "I am finally free from that burden. No more living 10 minutes away for her convenience. No more listening to the sighs about grandchildren she doesn't have. I am cutting the umbilical cord for good. This promotion, this new place, it's my liberation." The applause was immediate and loud. Glasses clinked together. Someone whooped. "To your freedom, Chloe," a male voice boomed. "To my freedom," she echoed, and I heard the distinct sound of her glass meeting others. I took a step backward, then another. The cold from the floor seeped up through my feet and into my legs, into my spine. I turned and walked down the hall, past the photographs on the wall, Chloe's graduation, our trip to the beach when she was 10, a picture of us laughing on this very sofa. I pushed open the door to my bedroom and placed the tray of glasses carefully on my dresser. My movements were precise. I did not look in the mirror. I sat on the edge of my bed. My hands rested flat on my knees. I listened to the distant, muffled joy from the other end of the house. The words played on a loop in my head, each one a clean, surgical cut. Burden, smothering obligation, guilt trip, liberation. I thought of the text check-ins. They were because she had been in a car accident at 19 and I had found out from the hospital, not from her. I thought of the dropped-off meals. They were during her first brutal year at the corporate firm when she called me crying twice a week from exhaustion. I thought of the hope for grandchildren, mentioned exactly twice in 5 years, always in response to her own complaints about her friends' parents not helping enough. I thought of the 10-minute distance. It was because I had co-signed the loan for her apartment, and the lender required a nearby guarantor. I had been a paralegal for 32 years. I understood the construction of a narrative. I knew how facts could be selected and arranged to tell a specific story. I had just never heard it done to me by my own child for an audience of strangers in my living room. The party lasted another 2 hours. I did not move from the bed. I heard the pitch of the noise rise and fall. I heard the front door open and close several times, accompanied by bursts of laughter and shouted goodbyes. Eventually, the house fell quiet. I heard the sink run in the kitchen, a few clatters. Then her footsteps came down the hall. They paused outside my door. I held my breath. The pause lasted 3 heartbeats. Then the footsteps continued to the guest room where she was staying. Only then did I lie down. I did not cry. I felt a hollow space open up inside my chest, a cavern where a constant warm light had always burned. Now it was dark and cold and very, very quiet. I stared at the ceiling. I replayed the timeline. The promotion she had called me about, breathless with excitement, my offer to help her celebrate, her request to use the house, my shopping, my cleaning, my silent pride in her, and then her toast, a burden. She had used the word without flinching. It was not a heat-of-the-moment slip. It was a prepared speech. The core message was gratitude to her friends for her liberation from me. When the first gray light of morning appeared at the window, I was still awake. I got up. I walked to the dresser and looked at the tray of clean glasses. I picked one up. It was a simple tumbler, clear and smooth. I carried it back to the kitchen. The living room was a disaster of empty bottles, crumpled napkins, and plates crusted with food. The air smelled of wine and perfume. I did not clean it. I filled the glass with water from the tap and drank it all. I placed the empty glass in the sink. Then I went to the small desk in the corner of the living room where my laptop sat. I opened it. I logged into my bank's website. I navigated to the credit card accounts. I had 2. One was mine. The other was the card I had given Chloe 3 years ago, for emergencies only. I had paid the balance every month. I looked at the recent transactions. There was a charge from a high-end home goods store from 2 days ago, another from a boutique wine shop from yesterday afternoon, the party supplies. I clicked on the card details. I found the button that said, Report Lost or Stolen. I did not hesitate. I clicked it. The website asked for a reason. I selected Other. A new card would be mailed to me. The old number was now invalid. It was a small administrative action. It took less than a minute. The silence in the wreckage of the room was absolute. I closed the laptop. I looked at the closed door to the guest room. I felt the new, cold clarity in my mind. This was not a wound to be soothed. It was a fact to be acknowledged. A balance sheet, suddenly and brutally audited, had been presented to me. I had spent a lifetime depositing love, sacrifice, and patience into an account held in my daughter's name. Last night, she had declared that account bankrupt and had called my life's investment a burden. I understood now that the account was closed. The rules had changed. It was time to assess what, if anything, was left for me to reclaim. I made a pot of strong tea and sat at the kitchen table. The morning sun streamed through the window, highlighting the dust motes in the air and the lingering mess from the night before. I did not touch it. I listened to the sounds from the guest room, the groan of the bed, the shuffle of feet, the click of the door. The hallway floorboard creaked under her weight. Chloe appeared in the doorway. She was wearing the silk pajamas I gave her for Christmas last year. Her makeup was smudged under her eyes, and she winced at the sunlight. She moved to the coffee maker, her back to me. "Morning," she said, her voice rough. God, my head. That champagne was brutal. She fumbled with the coffee filter. "Thanks again for letting us crash here. The place was perfect." I did not respond. I lifted my teacup and took a sip. The porcelain was warm against my fingers. She finally got the coffee started and turned around, leaning against the counter. She rubbed her temples. "So, I was thinking, maybe we could do brunch at that new place on Elm?" My treat, to say thanks. She offered a small, practiced smile. It was the same smile she used when asking for a favor. I placed my cup back on the saucer. The sound was precise in the quiet kitchen. "No, thank you," I said. Her smile faltered for a second. She shrugged. "Okay, maybe next weekend." She turned back to pour her coffee. "I'll help you clean this up before I go. Shouldn't take long." "Leave it," I said. That made her pause. She turned slowly, coffee mug in hand. She looked at me, then at the living room visible through the archway. Her gaze returned to my face. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her features. "Are you okay? You seem quiet." "I am quiet," I agreed. She took a sip of coffee, watching me over the rim of the mug. She was trying to read the situation, to categorize my mood. I could see the calculations behind her eyes. "Okay. Well, I should probably get going. I need to swing by my apartment and change before that meeting at 3. She started to move toward the hallway. "You called me a burden," I said. The words hung in the air between us. She stopped walking. Her back was to me. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she turned around. Her expression was a careful blank. "What?" "Last night, during your toast, you said you were finally free from that burden. You were referring to me." The color drained from her face, leaving her morning pallor a sickly gray. Her eyes widened slightly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She set the coffee mug down on the counter with a thud. You heard that?" "I was in the hallway. I had brought more glasses." A series of emotions raced across her face. Shock, panic, then a swift, defensive calculation. She took a step toward the table. "Mom, oh my God, you have to understand, it was just party talk. You know how it is. Everyone says stupid things when they're celebrating. It was for the crowd. It didn't mean anything." Her words came out in a rushed, breathless stream. I watched her. I noted the way her hands fluttered, the pleading tone she was adopting. It was a performance, an apology designed to end the discomfort and return things to normal. "It sounded very specific," I said. "The daily check-ins, the dropped-off food, the expectation that your life was my project. You had clearly given it thought." She put a hand to her forehead. "I was just venting. Making a joke out of normal mom stuff. Everyone complains about their parents. It's normal." Her voice took on a sharper edge, a hint of frustration that I wasn't immediately accepting her explanation. "You're taking it way too personally." "I believe taking a personal insult personally is the standard procedure," I said, my voice level. She stared at me. Her confusion was deepening, mixed with a dawning irritation. This wasn't following the usual script. I was not crying. I was not asking for reassurance. I was stating facts, and my calm was unsettling her. "Look, I'm sorry, okay?" she said, spreading her hands. "I'm sorry you heard that. I didn't mean for you to hear it, but you have to see it from my side. I'm a grown woman. I need my space. You're always there." "I see," I said. I took another sip of tea. The silence stretched. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. "So, are we good? Can we just forget about it?" It was a stupid thing to say. "No," I said. "We cannot forget about it." Her irritation broke through. "What do you want me to do, Mom? Grovel?" I said I'm sorry. What more do you want? I looked at her, this beautiful, entitled woman I had raised. I saw the impatience in the set of her jaw, the certainty that her apology was a currency I should accept. She believed this was a minor conflict, a bump to be smoothed over. "I want nothing from you," I said, "but you should know I've taken an initial action." Her eyes narrowed. "Action? What does that mean?" "The emergency credit card I gave you. The one you used 2 days ago for home goods and yesterday for party wine. I've canceled it. The number is no longer active." For a full 5 seconds, she was completely still. Then her face contorted. You canceled my card? Why would you do that?" "You said you were free. Financial ties are a form of burden. I am relieving you of one." "That's for emergencies. she protested, her voice rising. A new throw pillow and a case of Prosecco are not emergencies. You have a promotion and a new loft with a river view. You announced your financial liberation last night. My support is evidently a burden. So I have removed it. She took a step forward, her hands gripping the back of the empty chair opposite me. Her knuckles were white. You're overreacting. This is insane. You're punishing me over a few words said at a party? I am not punishing you, I corrected her. I am accepting your declaration at face value. You are free. I am adjusting the practical arrangements to match your stated reality. I need that card, she insisted. Panic was seeping into her anger now. What if my car breaks down? What if I have a real emergency? You have a salary now. You can budget for an emergency fund. That is what free, independent adults do. She stared at me, her breath coming faster. The reality of the consequence was landing, and it was not the gentle, forgiving landing she expected. You can't just cut me off like that. I can. It is my card in my name. I pay the bills. I decided to cancel it. The matter is administrative, not emotional. This is because you're hurt, she said, trying a new tactic. Her voice softened, attempting empathy. I get it. I hurt your feelings. Let's talk about this. Let's have brunch and talk. There is nothing to talk about, I said. I stood up. I carried my teacup and saucer to the sink. I rinsed them and placed them in the dishwasher. I turned to face her. You should go to your meeting. You wouldn't want to be late. She was speechless. She just stood there in my kitchen in the pajamas I bought her, looking utterly lost. The dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The power of her apology had evaporated against the concrete wall of my action. Finally, she straightened her shoulders. A mask of cold anger descended. Fine. Have it your way. If you want to be like that, fine. She stormed out of the kitchen. I heard her in the guest room gathering her things with loud, abrupt noises. A few minutes later, she marched back down the hallway, her party clothes from last night stuffed into her tote bag. She did not look at me. The front door opened and slammed shut. The house was silent again. I looked at the mess in the living room. Then I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. I opened a new document. I titled it Ledger. I began to type, listing items in a simple bullet point format. College tuition differential. Paid her portion not covered by scholarship. August 2016, 2017, 2018. Down payment for Honda Civic. March 2019. Security deposit and first month's rent for current apartment. June 2021. Monthly utility top-ups from June 2021 to present. Furniture allowance. August 2021. The list grew. Each entry was a fact, a transaction, a piece of the burden she had so gladly declared herself free of. I worked without pause, the clicking of the keys the only sound in the quiet, sunlit house. The list on my screen was longer than I had anticipated. Each bullet point was a memory, not of sentiment but of logistics. A bank transfer here, a co-signed check there. I had kept records, a habit from my paralegal days. Tax returns, bank statements, and old check registers were stacked neatly in a filing cabinet in the den. I spent the rest of that day and the next methodically pulling each relevant document. I made photocopies. I created a spreadsheet with columns for date, purpose, and amount. The total sum at the bottom was a number that made me pause. I had never added it all up before. Seeing it there, in stark black digits, was a separate kind of shock. My friend Evelyn called on the third morning. Her voice was crisp on the phone. I haven't heard from you. You're either dead or plotting. Which is it? Plotting, I said, my eyes on the spreadsheet. Good, I'm coming over. I'm bringing coffee. Do not argue. 20 minutes later, she was at my kitchen table, 2 large coffees between us. She was a small, sharp-eyed woman who had sold real estate for 40 years. She missed nothing. She glanced at the neat stacks of paper on the desk in the living room. So, the fallout, she stated. Yes. And how is our beloved Chloe weathering her newfound freedom? She called twice yesterday. I didn't answer. She sent 3 texts. I didn't reply. Evelyn nodded, a satisfied glint in her eye. "And what's all this?" She gestured with her chin toward the papers. "Documentation," I said. "A financial history of her adulthood." Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "For what purpose?" "I am considering legal action, a formal demand for repayment." Her eyebrows shot up, then a slow, approving smile spread across her face. "Well, you didn't come out of retirement to play tiddlywinks, did you? Do you have a lawyer?" "Robert Carson. He handled my will and the title on the house. He's semi-retired, but he still comes into the office. Call him. Today. Don't let this fester. Momentum is everything." She sipped her coffee. "What's the number?" I told her the total from the spreadsheet. Evelyn whistled softly. "That's a down payment on a life." And she called it a burden. She shook her head. "You know she'll fight it. She'll cry and scream and call you a monster." "I know," I said. The thought no longer caused a flutter in my chest. It was just another predictable variable in the equation. "You're sure you want to do this? It's the point of no return, Maya." I looked at the stacks of paper, each one proof of a choice I had made to support, to enable, to cushion. I thought of the word burden echoing in my hallway. "I have never been more sure," I said. I called Robert Carson's office that afternoon. His secretary recognized my voice and put me through. I explained the situation in brief, factual terms, a verbal agreement for loans to an adult child now repudiated with documentary evidence. I needed a formal demand letter drafted. "I see," he said. His voice was calm, professional. He had known me for 15 years. He had met Chloe at my office Christmas parties when she was a teenager. "This is a difficult step, Maya." "It is a necessary one," I replied. We made an appointment for the next morning. His office was on the second floor of a brick building downtown. The waiting area had faded blue carpet and framed diplomas on the wall. It smelled of old paper and lemon wood polish. Robert greeted me himself, ushering me into a conference room with a large oak table. He was in his late 60s with a kind, weary face. "Let's see what you have," he said. I opened my bag and laid out the folders. I had organized them chronologically. I handed him the summary spreadsheet first. He put on his reading glasses and scanned it. His expression remained neutral. He then began to go through the supporting documents, one folder at a time. He asked occasional clarifying questions. "This tuition payment in 2017, was there any written agreement about repayment?" "No. It was a verbal understanding that she would contribute when she was able." "And the car down payment?" "Same, a loan to be repaid." He nodded, making notes on a legal pad. We worked in silence for nearly an hour. Finally, he set his pen down and took off his glasses. "This is exceptionally well organized, Maya. As you know, these are technically informal loans. They can be difficult to enforce. However, the volume of documentation, the clear pattern of support, and the fact that she is a professional with a steady income all work in your favor. A strongly worded demand letter from this office often produces results. It makes the debt official. It changes the conversation." "That is the goal," I said. "The goal is repayment?" "The goal," I said carefully, "is to formally acknowledge the debt, to transform a lifetime of vague obligation into a concrete sum on paper. What she chooses to do with that information is her concern." He looked at me for a long moment, understanding. "It's a statement." "Yes." He drafted the letter while I sat there. He read it aloud to me. It was written on the firm's letterhead. It cited the total amount, itemized by major category. It referenced the supporting documentation available for review. It stated that the funds were provided as loans with a reasonable expectation of repayment. It formally demanded payment in full within 30 days, or alternatively, a proposal for a structured repayment plan to be negotiated in good faith. It was polite, precise, and utterly cold. "This is perfect," I said when he finished. "I'll need her current address for service." I provided it. the address of the apartment I had co-signed for. He signed the letter with a firm hand. His secretary came in to notarize it. The sound of the stamp was a definitive click. She made a copy for my files and placed the original in a large, stiff envelope. "It will go out certified mail today," Robert said. "She'll have to sign for it." I stood up and gathered my copies. The folder was satisfyingly thick and heavy in my hands. "Thank you, Robert." He walked me to the door. He paused, his hand on the knob. "Maya, be prepared. This will likely escalate things. Dramatically." I met his gaze. Things were escalated the moment she gave that toast. I am merely choosing the battlefield. I left the office and walked to my car. The sun was bright. I placed the folder on the passenger seat. I did not feel triumphant. I felt focused. The emotion had been converted into action, and the action had taken a tangible form. A stack of paper, a legal demand. It was no longer a hurt inside my head. It was a fact in the world. I started the car and drove home, the weight of the ledger beside me finally feeling like it was mine to control. I did not wait by the phone. I went about my routine. I watered the plants on the sun porch, wiping dust from the broad leaves of the fiddle leaf fig. I went grocery shopping, choosing fruits and vegetables with care. I organized a closet. The thick folder from Robert Carson's office sat on my desk, a quiet presence. I knew the timeline. Certified mail typically takes 2 to 3 days. On the afternoon of the third day, I was repotting a peace lily that had outgrown its container. My hands were buried in cool, damp potting soil. The phone rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked at the screen. It was Chloe. I let it ring 4 times, then answered. "Hello." The sound on the other end was not a voice, but a ragged intake of breath, like someone punched in the stomach. Then the words erupted, a torrent of high-pitched, incredulous fury. "What is this? What the hell is this, Mom? A lawyer? You sent me a letter from a lawyer." I said nothing. I listened to the crackle of her anger down the line. "This is insane. This is literally insane. Formal demand for repayment? Are you out of your mind? Since when was any of that a loan? Since when?" I waited for a pause. It came, filled with her heavy, angry breathing. "Since the beginning," I said, my voice level. "Each time it was understood as support to be paid back when you were established." "Understood by who?" "By you! You never said that. You just gave it. You can't retroactively decide it was a loan because you're pissed off at me." "The documentation is clear," I said. "The amounts, the dates, the purposes. The expectation of repayment is a reasonable one for an adult child receiving substantial financial gifts." "Gifts! They were gifts! From a mother to a daughter! What is wrong with you?" Her voice was climbing into a shriek. "Do you have any idea what this would do to me? This amount? I just signed a lease on a new place. I have bills." I shifted the phone to my other ear. The new loft with the river view, I recall. "Congratulations again." There was a stunned silence. Then her tone changed, shifting from outrage to a wheedling, hurt confusion. "Mom, please, this is crazy. Let's just talk." I said I was sorry. "How many times do I have to say it? Why are you doing this to your own daughter?" "I am not doing anything to you," I said, examining a leaf for brown spots. "I am presenting you with an accounting. You declared my support a burden you were free from. I am merely agreeing with you and asking for the return of the burden's material components." "That's not fair. You're twisting my words. It was a party. I didn't mean it like that." "You meant it for your friends." I heard the meaning clearly. I paused. "The vintage champagne you served at that party, for example, the one you charged to the emergency card, was that part of your burden?" She went quiet again. "Or the area rug you bought for your new loft 2 weeks ago, also on that card. Was that a necessary expense while you were laboring under the weight of my support?" "How do you know about that?" she whispered, her voice suddenly small. "I reviewed the statements before I canceled the card. You told me you couldn't afford to contribute to your own car insurance last fall. Yet in October, there was a $300 charge at a boutique for a leather handbag. In November, a weekend spa charge for $250. The burden seemed to allow for certain luxuries. Her breathing was loud in my ear. I could imagine her standing in her apartment, the lawyer's letter crumpled in her fist, her face pale. The reality of the ledger, of my quiet observation, was dawning on her. "You've been spying on my finances?" she accused, though the force was gone from her words. I was paying the bills. It is prudent to review statements for errors. I noted no errors, only a pattern of discretionary spending while claiming financial dependence on me. "So what? You want to ruin me? Is that it? You want me to be broke and homeless? Will that make you feel better?" The anger was returning, fueled by panic. "I want you to honor a debt," I said, my tone final. "The letter outlines the options: payment in full within 30 days or a proposal for a repayment plan. You should discuss it with a financial advisor or your own lawyer." "My own lawyer? I can't afford a lawyer." "That is a financial consideration for you to manage. The letter has been delivered. The matter is now formal." "I'm not paying this," she said, her voice hardening into defiance. "You can't make me. No court will make me pay back my mother for being my mother." "You are welcome to test that assumption," I replied. "My attorney believes the documentation is compelling, but that is your choice to make. Goodbye, Chloe." "Mom, wait." I ended the call. I placed the phone on the table beside the potted plant. My hands were still faintly dusty from the soil. I looked at them. They were steady. I returned to repotting the peace lily. I carefully positioned the root ball in the new, larger pot and began to fill in the spaces with fresh soil, pressing it down gently around the base. The plant would have more room now. It would be able to grow without being constricted by the limits of its old container. The phone rang again 2 more times. I did not answer. It buzzed with a series of text messages. I did not look. I finished with the plant, watered it thoroughly, and cleaned up my workspace. The silence in my house was complete, and for the first time since the night of the party, it felt like my own. It was not an empty silence. It was a silence of deliberation. She had felt the first concrete consequence. The shock was wearing off, and the calculation would soon begin. My next move was not to move at all. It was to let the weight of the number on that legal letter settle onto her shoulders. The very shoulders she claimed were now free. I was curious to see how she would bear it. The silence after our call was not an end, but a space. I filled it with things that required my hands and my attention. The most consistent of these was the community garden project at the old lot on Spruce Street. I had signed up as a volunteer months before, attending the occasional planning meeting, but my involvement had been peripheral. Now I began to go every Tuesday and Thursday morning. The lot was a half-acre of previously neglected city land. The soil had been tested and cleared. Raised beds were under construction from donated lumber. A local hardware store had provided tools. On my first real work day, I was assigned to a team building a compost bin. My partner was a retired man named Leo, who had been a carpenter. He showed me how to level the posts. "You're a quick study," he said after I'd hammered a brace into place correctly on the first try. "I like instructions that make sense," I replied. It was physical work. The sun was warm on my back. The smell of fresh-cut wood and damp earth was clean and simple. There was no subtext in digging a post hole. There was only the depth required and the stability of the structure. I found a rhythm in it. Evelyn stopped by one Thursday wearing impractical white sneakers that quickly got dusty. She watched me for a while as I helped a younger woman, Maria, plant tomato seedlings. "You look different," Evelyn said later, as we sat on an overturned crate sharing a bottle of water. "I'm dirty," I said. "That's not it. You look present, not somewhere else in your head." I considered that. It was true. For those hours, I did not think about ledgers or lawyers or the specific pitch of Chloe's angry voice. I thought about spacing plants and water drainage and the proper tension for a trellis. It's useful work, I said. It is, and it gets you out of that house. She took a sip of water. So I hear from my niece that our girl is making the rounds. I looked at her. Evelyn's network of former clients and neighborhood contacts was vast and efficient. What rounds? The pity rounds. She's been calling relatives. My sister Beth got a call last weekend. Chloe was apparently very upset, talking about how you've turned on her, how you're demanding money she doesn't have, trying to destroy her life right as she's getting started. She was fishing for sympathy, maybe for someone to intervene. And? Evelyn's smile was thin. Beth remembered the time Chloe was 17 and told everyone her aunt's Christmas gift was tacky and re-gifted. She also remembers you driving Chloe to 3 different SAT prep courses you paid for. Beth's sympathy was in short supply. She told Chloe that family disputes were private and wished her good luck. I absorbed this. It was both expected and informative. Chloe was moving to the next strategic phase, rallying allies. It seemed the campaign was not going well. My cousin Martin called me, Evelyn continued. Chloe reached out to him too. He's a softer touch. He asked me what was really going on. I told him the truth, that Chloe publicly humiliated you and called a lifetime of support a burden, and you are now, very politely and legally, asking her to return the burden in monetary form. He said, "Oh." Then he said, "Well, that's different." He hasn't returned her calls since. I brushed soil from my jeans. She overestimated her position. She's always overestimated her position, Evelyn said bluntly, because you were always there to underwrite the difference. Now you've called the loan. People see that. They might not say it, but they see it. It changes the story. A few days later, Maria, the young woman with the tomato plants, asked me if I could take the lead on planning the perennial herb garden for the next section. She said I seemed to have a good sense for organization. I agreed. That evening, I spent time researching companion planting for herbs, drawing a simple layout grid on graph paper. It was a small responsibility, but it was given based on observation of my competence, not on obligation or familial duty. The distinction was meaningful. Chloe's attempts to mobilize the family faded, as Evelyn reported they would. Without a chorus of support, her narrative, that of a victimized daughter, lacked credibility. I received no calls from concerned aunts or uncles. The silence from that front was another form of validation. At the garden, progress was visible. The compost bin was finished. Several raised beds were planted. The city provided a link to a water line. I was teaching Leo how to maintain the simple spreadsheet I'd set up to track plant varieties and planting dates. In return, he showed me how to sharpen the garden tools properly. One afternoon, as I was labeling herb markers, Maria sat down next to me with a sigh. "My mother thinks this is all a waste of time," she said, gesturing at the lot. "She says I should be focusing on my career, not playing in the dirt." "What do you say?" I asked. "I say it makes me happy, that it's real." She doesn't get it. Maria was in her late 20s, not much older than Chloe. She looked at me. "Do your kids think it's weird?" I paused in my writing. "I have one daughter. She is currently very focused on her own life. I don't believe she has an opinion on how I spend my time." Maria nodded. "Lucky. The guilt trips are exhausting." "Yes," I said, my voice even. "They can be." I finished the labels. The words rosemary, thyme, and sage were written in clear capital letters. These were things that would grow with care. They would be useful. They would return the attention given to them many times over. I placed the markers in a box, ready for the next workday. I was building something. It was not a defense or a weapon. It was a garden. It was a new routine. It was a community that asked for my labor and gave back a sense of place. The hollow space inside me was not gone, but it was no longer an empty chamber. It was being filled, slowly, with the tangible results of my own choices, made freely for myself. The momentum had shifted. I was no longer merely reacting to a blow. I was cultivating new ground. The 30-day deadline stated in the lawyer's letter was a week away. I did not wonder if Chloe would respond. I knew she would. Her initial strategy of outrage and family mobilization had failed. The next logical step was negotiation. She contacted me via text, a medium she could control. "We need to talk, not on the phone, in person. Can we meet?" I waited 6 hours before replying. "Where?" "The Courtyard Cafe, tomorrow, 10 a.m. I knew the place. It was a neutral, public location downtown, often busy with professionals on their coffee breaks. She had chosen a stage where she could perform reasonableness and where I would be less likely to cause a scene. I agreed. I arrived at 9:55. I saw her immediately at a small table near the window. She was already there, which was unlike her. She had a notebook open and a pen in her hand, projecting an air of serious business. She looked thinner, and there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't fully conceal. She stood up as I approached, an awkward, stilted gesture. "Mom, thanks for coming." I nodded and sat down. A waitress came over. I ordered a black tea. Chloe already had a latte, half finished. She didn't waste time. "I got the letter, obviously. I've had some time to think and to look at my finances." I remained silent, waiting. She took a breath, putting on what I recognized as her professional mediator face. "The amount. It's significant. Paying it in full isn't possible for me right now. You know that. But I want to make this right. I do." She leaned forward slightly. "So I have a proposal. A compromise." I took the cup of tea the waitress brought and stirred it slowly. "Go on." "I can commit to a monthly payment, a reasonable one. Say $200. I'll set up an automatic transfer. We can call it a gesture of goodwill, to acknowledge your support over the years." She spoke quickly as if she'd rehearsed the lines. "And in return, you withdraw the legal demand. We put this behind us. We start fresh." I took a sip of tea. It was hot and plain. $200 a month. "Yes, it's what I can manage responsibly right now." "At that rate," I said, placing my cup down with deliberate care, "it would take approximately 24 years to repay the principal, without accounting for interest or the time value of money. That is not a compromise, Chloe. That is an indefinite postponement." Her composure flickered. "It's what I can afford. I have the new lease, my car payment, my student loans. You have a corporate salary and a promotion. You chose a luxury apartment. You have discretionary spending habits as documented. Can afford is a question of priority. Repaying this debt is clearly not one of yours. So you want to bankrupt me? Is that it?" Her voice tightened, losing its mediating tone. "I want the debt repaid," I said. The letter offered a structured repayment plan as an alternative to payment in full. A serious plan based on a realistic assessment of your income and expenses, to be negotiated in good faith. What you have proposed is not good faith. It is a tactic." She closed her notebook with a snap. "What do you want from me then? A pound of flesh? Just tell me what will make you stop this." I looked at her, at the genuine frustration and fear in her eyes. She still believed this was an emotional punishment that could be bargained down. She did not see it as a real financial obligation. "I will tell you my terms," I said. My voice was quiet but clear over the hum of the cafe. "They are not open for negotiation. First, the financial matter. You will have a new formal repayment agreement drawn up by my attorney. The total will be the amount on the letter. The term will be 5 years. The payments will be monthly, with no interest. This is more than fair. It is a gift." Her face paled. 5 years? That's impossible. The monthly payment would be substantial, I finished for her. "It will require you to adjust your lifestyle, to prioritize. That is the point. And if I refuse, then I will instruct my attorney to proceed with filing a civil suit for the full amount. You can explain to a judge why you believe a mother's financial support, meticulously documented, was a gift with no expectation of return. You can explain your toast. My attorney is confident. She swallowed hard, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. "And the second term?" she asked, her voice hollow. "The second term is relational," I said. "If at any point in the future you wish to have a relationship with me that is not solely defined by this financial agreement, it will be conditional." "Conditional on what?" she whispered. "On us both attending 6 months of joint family therapy. You will find the therapist, and you will pay for the sessions. We will address the events that led us here. We will address your perception of me as a burden and my enabling of your entitlement. If, after 6 months, we both choose to continue, we may then discuss what a new relationship looks like. Until that time, and unless that process is initiated by you and followed through, our contact will be limited to matters pertaining to the repayment agreement." She stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. The totality of the terms, their cold, structural finality, was crashing over her. This was not a fight she could win with tears or tantrums. It was a contract. You're serious." "Entirely. You'd make your own daughter go to therapy with you as a condition?" "I am not making you do anything. I am stating the prerequisites for a relationship. You are free to choose otherwise. Many people have civil, distant relationships with their parents based solely on financial obligations. That is a valid choice." She looked down at her hands, clenched in her lap. The performance was over. The reality of the box she was in was settling around her. "I need to think about this." "You have 1 week before the deadline in the original letter. You can communicate your decision to Robert Carson's office. If I do not hear from him with your agreement to my terms by that date, I will instruct him to file." I stood up. I placed a $5 bill next to my untouched tea to cover the cost. "The choice is yours, Chloe. You wanted your freedom. This is what it looks like. It comes with responsibilities and consequences. I suggest you think carefully about what you truly want to be free from and what you are willing to pay to get it." I walked out of the cafe. The morning sun was bright. I did not look back. I had set the terms. The ball was now irrevocably in her court. The power was no longer in reacting, but in the structure I had built. The boundaries were clear, hard, and legal. For the first time, I felt not the heat of anger, but the steady chill of absolute clarity. The deadline passed without a response directed to Robert Carson's office. Instead, I received a single text from Chloe on the final day. "I can't do your terms. It's too much. You're asking too much." I did not reply. I called Robert and instructed him to proceed with preparing the civil suit. The process would be slow, but its initiation was a fact that would enter Chloe's life as a permanent mark, a credit report scar. I did not need to monitor it. The law, once set in motion, has its own momentum. I learned of the consequences indirectly in fragments. Evelyn came over one evening, a gleam in her eye. "You remember my friend Sandra? Her daughter is a leasing agent at the Chroma Falls complex, the luxury lofts." I nodded, watering a pot of basil on my windowsill. "She had an interesting encounter last week. A young woman, a current tenant, came in screaming about unfair practices and predatory landlords. She was demanding to break her lease without penalty, claiming financial hardship, said a family member was suing her." I snipped a yellowing leaf from the basil plant. "Did she succeed?" Evelyn snorted. "Not a chance. The lease is ironclad. Breaking it would cost her 2 months' rent as a penalty, plus forfeiture of the security deposit." Sandra's daughter said the woman left in tears. Real tears, not performative ones. Panic tears. I placed the watering can on the counter. "I see." "The unraveling has begun," Evelyn said with quiet satisfaction. "It starts with the lifestyle, the things she thought were entitlements." A few days later, I was at the community garden, helping install a drip irrigation system. Maria was working beside me, her phone face up on the ground. It buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it and made a small, dismissive sound. "What?" I asked, tightening a connector. "Oh, nothing. Just social media drama. A girl I went to college with. She's always posting about her amazing life, her fancy apartment, her designer, whatever. Today she posted a long, vague rant about betrayal by those closest to you and learning who your real family is. It's so transparent." Maria rolled her eyes. "Everyone in the comments is asking if she's okay, feeding the drama. It's pathetic." I did not ask for a name. I knew. Chloe had moved her campaign to a public digital stage, seeking the validation her family had denied her. It was another form of begging, dressed as victimhood. The most direct evidence came via a misdial. My phone rang late on a Tuesday evening. I answered out of habit. "Just can't do it, Jason. I can't cover my half if you're not going to. My mother is literally suing me and you're talking about a ski trip." It was Chloe's voice, high and strained, crackling with poor reception. She hadn't meant to call me. I said nothing. I listened. There was a muffled male voice in the background, irritated. "I don't care if you think it's unfair," Chloe cried. "You live here too. The rent is due next week, and after the lawyer retainer I had to pay, I'm short. You need to step up or we're going to have a bigger problem." More muffled arguing, then a sob of frustration. "Forget it. Just forget it. I'll figure it out myself. I always have to figure it out myself." The call disconnected. She had never realized she'd reached me. The conversation was a window into a world of shrinking options. Arguments with a boyfriend over shared bills, the reality of legal retainers, the specter of rent. The burden of independence, it seemed, was heavier than the one she had discarded. Meanwhile, my own life was accruing small, positive increments. The drip irrigation system was a success. The plants looked healthier. A reporter from the local paper, a young man doing a series on urban renewal projects, came to the garden. He interviewed Maria and Leo. As he was leaving, Maria pointed at me. "You should talk to Maya. She's our spreadsheet wizard and herb garden guru. She got this whole section organized." The reporter turned to me, smiling. "Got a minute?" We spoke for 10 minutes. I talked about the practicalities: volunteer coordination, soil composition, water conservation. I did not mention my personal life. The following week, a short article appeared in the community section with a photo of the garden. The quote attributed to me was, "It's about building something that lasts and benefits everyone. The work is its own reward." My name was spelled correctly. Leo printed out a copy and tacked it to the community bulletin board under the makeshift shed. "Look at that," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Famous." At the grocery store the next day, Mrs. Alvarez from 2 streets over stopped me by the avocados. "I saw your picture in the paper, Maya. That garden project looks wonderful." "Good for you." I thanked her. The recognition was modest, local, and earned. It was based on something I had built with my own hands and time, not on a role I had occupied by default. The contrast was not lost on me. In my quiet world, things were growing, being recognized, taking root. In Chloe's world, things were contracting. Her budget, her social support, her perceived options. She was learning the cost of the freedom she had so loudly proclaimed. Every choice to prioritize appearance over substance was now generating an invoice, and she was having to open the envelope. I felt no glee. I felt a cold, clinical verification. My actions had been a response. Her reactions were now the consequences. They were hers to manage. My focus was on the next task at the garden, the next line item in my own orderly life. The trajectory of our 2 lives, once so tightly woven, was now clearly divergent. I watched the separation not with sadness, but with the detached interest of a scientist observing a predicted result. The experiment was proceeding. The data was coming in. Robert Carson's office called to inform me that the civil suit paperwork was ready for my review. I made an appointment for the following Monday. Before that meeting, however, I had another matter to settle with him. I had been considering it for weeks, and the decision was now final. I sat across from him, the draft of the lawsuit resting in a folder between us. "Before we proceed with this," I said, tapping the folder, "I need to execute a separate document. I want to place my house in a trust." Robert adjusted his glasses. "Estate planning is always wise. What are the terms you're considering?" "The house is to be placed in an irrevocable trust. I will remain the beneficiary during my lifetime, with full right to live in it. Upon my death, the trust will not dissolve to pass to any individual heir. Instead, the property will be sold. The proceeds will be used to establish a permanent endowment fund for the Spruce Street Community Garden Project, specifically for its maintenance, expansion, and youth programming. The trust will be administered by the city's Parks Foundation." He was silent for a moment, writing notes. "This disinherits any potential heirs, specifically Chloe. You understand that?" "I do. And your reasoning? For the court should it ever be challenged?" "The reasoning is twofold," I said, my voice even. "First, the community garden is a public good that provides lasting value to the neighborhood. Second, the heir in question has already publicly declared her relationship to me and my support as a burden she is free from. I am aligning the disposition of my assets with that declared reality. She is free from the burden of this property as well." A faint smile touched Robert's lips. "That is exceptionally clear. We'll draft it today. It will take some time to establish, but we can file the preliminary paperwork immediately." I spent an hour reviewing the trust documents. The language was dry and legal, exactly as I wanted it. I signed where he indicated. The house, the modest 3-bedroom where I had raised Chloe, the place she had called a burden, was now legally encased in a structure that would forever separate it from her. It was no longer an asset she could one day anticipate. It was a future gift to a community of strangers who appreciated a well-tended garden. 2 days later, I texted Chloe. "We need to meet one final time. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. at the house." She replied an hour later. "Why?" "To conclude our business." She arrived precisely at 4. She looked worn. Her expensive handbag was absent, replaced by a simple canvas tote. She did not ask to come in. We stood in the living room, the same room where her party had been held. It was now meticulously clean, every surface bare. "What do you want?" she asked. Her voice was flat, drained of its former performative energy. "If it's about the lawsuit, my lawyer said to not discuss it directly with you." "It is not about the lawsuit," I said. "It is about the house." She glanced around, a flicker of old possessiveness in her eyes. This was the place she'd grown up. She still saw it, on some level, as her eventual inheritance. "What about it?" "I have made a decision regarding its future. I've placed it in an irrevocable trust." She blinked, processing the term. "A trust? For who?" "Not for a person," I said. "For a purpose. Upon my death, the house will be sold. All proceeds will fund an endowment for the Spruce Street Community Garden. It will ensure the garden's survival in perpetuity." The words did not seem to land at first. They were too foreign, too far outside the narrative of her expectations. Then her face slowly changed. The confusion hardened into disbelief, then into dawning horror. You're giving my inheritance away? To a garden?" "It is not your inheritance," I corrected. "It is my asset. And yes, you can't do that." The cry was instinctive, outraged. "I already have. The paperwork is filed. The house is no longer a simple piece of real estate to be passed on. It is a dedicated charitable trust. You will never own it. You will never see a penny from its sale." She took a step back, as if physically pushed. Her eyes darted around the room, seeing it anew, not as a childhood home, but as a locked vault. "Why? Why would you do that?" "To punish me." "To align reality with your statements," I said calmly. You stood in this room and toasted your freedom from the burden of me. This house and the life I built in it was the most tangible symbol of that burden. You were so happy to be free of it. I am ensuring your freedom is permanent and complete. You are free from any concern about this property, its upkeep, or its value. It will never be yours to manage, to sell, or to fight over. You are free. The full, grotesque irony of it crashed down on her. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her face, pale before, went ashen. She had thought the financial demand was the weapon. She had not anticipated this. This was the theft of a future she had always assumed was hers. The final, absolute severance. The mortgage, she stammered, grabbing at a last straw. You still have a mortgage. You can't just... The mortgage was paid off 7 years ago, I said. I used the lump sum from my retirement buyout. I never mentioned it because it wasn't relevant. The house is free and clear. The trust is unencumbered. That was the final blow. The burden she had despised had not been a financial weight on me at all. I had carried it alone, and then I had eliminated it, only to transform it into something that would forever benefit a cause she would never care about. Her assumed safety net, her last resort asset, was not just taken away. It had never existed in the way she thought. She stood there, utterly silent. The anger was gone. The pleading was gone. All that was left was a hollow, shocked understanding. She was not facing a punitive mother. She was facing the logical conclusion of her own words, executed with legal precision. She had wanted freedom from the burden. Now she had it in its most absolute form. We have nothing further to discuss, I said. You can see yourself out. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, leaving her standing alone in the center of the living room, in the house that was no longer, and never would be, any part of her future. I did not look back. I had delivered the information. The impact was hers to absorb. The last thread of assumed entitlement had just been cut, and the silence that followed was the sound of its falling. The silence in the living room was complete. I walked into the kitchen and began washing the single cup and saucer that were in the sink. The water was hot. I used a cloth and methodically cleaned the porcelain. I could hear nothing from the other room. No movement, no tears, no words. I finished washing the cup, rinsed it, and placed it in the dish rack to dry. I dried my hands on a towel. Then I walked back to the doorway between the kitchen and the living room. Chloe had not moved. She stood exactly where I had left her, in the center of the rug. Her shoulders were slumped forward. Her head was bowed, but her eyes were open, staring at nothing. Her hands hung limp at her sides. The canvas tote bag was on the floor near her feet, where it had slipped from her grasp. I observed her for a full minute. She did not blink. She seemed to have stopped breathing. It was the stillness of total systemic shock. I walked past her toward the front hallway. I took my light jacket from the coat closet and put it on. I picked up my purse and my house keys from the small table by the door. As I turned, she made a sound. It was not a word. It was a faint, strangled exhale, like the last air leaving a punctured lung. Her head turned slowly toward me. Her eyes were wide, glassy, and utterly lost. They searched my face, but I don't think she was seeing me. She was seeing the void where her assumptions had been. Her lips moved. No sound came out. She tried again. A whisper, cracked and dry. You really... She did not finish the sentence. There was no sentence that could finish it. The information has been delivered, I said, my voice neutral. The matter is settled. I saw the struggle in her face, the desperate need to say something, to launch one last argument, to find a lever that would change this reality. But every possible avenue was closed. The financial threat. I was already suing her, an emotional appeal. She had burned that bridge herself, and I had codified its destruction in a trust document. Familial obligation. She had renounced it. Legal challenge. She knew I had the better documentation and the clearer case. There was nothing left to say. no move to make. Her face began to crumple. Not in the pretty, performative way she used to cry when she was a teenager wanting something. This was a visceral, ugly collapse. Her features seemed to dissolve. Her mouth twisted open in a silent wail. Tears welled and spilled over, tracking through her makeup. She brought a hand up to cover her mouth as if to hold in a scream, but no scream came. There was only the silent, shaking disintegration. She was realizing in that moment the totality of her miscalculation. She had not been dealing with a hurt mother who could be placated. She had been dealing with a woman who had spent a career understanding systems and consequences. She had triggered a process, and the process had reached its logical terminal point. I had not just taken things away. I had shown her that they had never been hers to claim. The support was a loan. The home was a trust. The relationship had been conditional on respect, a condition she had violated. The foundation of her adult life, which she had perceived as an entitled inheritance, was revealed to be a series of revocable privileges, and I had revoked them. She sank to her knees on the rug. She did not fall dramatically. She folded like a marionette with its strings cut. She knelt there, her face in her hands, her body racked with silent sobs. It was the most genuine emotion I had seen from her in years. I felt nothing. No pity, no triumph, only a cold confirmation. The experiment was complete. The subject had received the stimulus and exhibited the predicted response. I walked to the front door. I unlocked it and opened it. The afternoon light streamed into the hallway. I did not look back at her. I stepped outside onto the front porch. I pulled the door closed behind me. The latch clicked with a firm, final sound. I walked down the path to the sidewalk. I did not hurry. My steps were even. I got into my car. I sat for a moment, the keys in my hand. I looked at the front of my house. The windows were clean. The paint was fresh. It was a good house. It had been a home. Now it was something else. An asset, a trust, a future garden fund. It was mine to live in, and then it would become a legacy for something that grew. I started the car and drove away. I did not wonder what she would do next. I did not wonder if she would stay there, kneeling on the floor. That was no longer my concern. My concern was the meeting scheduled at the community garden in 1 hour to discuss the irrigation schedule for the following week. As I drove, I replayed the scene in my mind, not as a participant, but as an analyst. The silence had been the most significant element. Her speechlessness was the acknowledgement I had needed. It was the proof that she finally understood the scale of her error. Words had started this. Silence had ended it. There was a symmetry to that which I appreciated. The rage was gone. The heartbreak was a sealed compartment. What remained was a clear, quiet space. I had stated my case. I had presented my evidence. I had executed my decisions. The verdict was in the reality I had constructed. The judgment was her to live with. I arrived at the garden. Leo and Maria were already there, by the shed. Leo waved. I parked and got out. The air smelled of turned earth and rosemary. "You're right on time," Maria said, smiling. "We were just talking about the basil. It's going crazy." "That's good," I said, joining them. "We should harvest some this week for the community kitchen." I looked out over the plots. The neat rows, the green shoots. This was what I had built. This was what remained. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was mine. The resilience garden was in full, riotous bloom. The city council had approved the name change 2 months prior, and a simple hand-painted sign now stood at the entrance. The herb garden I designed was a dense tapestry of green, purple, and silver. Tomatoes hung heavy on their vines in the neighboring beds. The drip irrigation system worked flawlessly. It was a Tuesday morning, and the late summer sun was warm, but not yet oppressive. I was checking the ties on the climbing pea plants when Leo walked over, holding a small, flat package. Mail came for the Garden Association. "This one's addressed to you personally. Care of the garden." I wiped my hands on my trousers and took it. It was a standard white envelope, my name written in a familiar, now less assured script. There was no return address. The postmark was local. "Everything all right?" Leo asked, his tone gentle. He had pieced together fragments of my story over the months, never prying but offering steady presence. "I believe so," I said. "Thank you, Leo." He nodded and moved off to check the compost bins. I walked to the shaded bench we'd installed under the old oak tree at the lot's edge. I sat down. I opened the envelope with my thumbnail. Inside was a single sheet of plain stationery, folded in thirds. The writing was in blue ink. Mom. I am not writing to ask for anything. I know I have no right to ask. I am writing because I have been thinking, and I needed to put some of it down. A lawyer advised me it's better not to, but I'm doing it anyway. I moved out of the loft. I couldn't afford it, and it felt wrong to be there. I'm in a smaller place with a roommate. It's fine. I settled the lawsuit. I agreed to the 5-year repayment plan you outlined. The first payment has been made. It's automated. You'll get a statement from the bank. I've started seeing a therapist, by myself. It was that or keep screaming at walls. We talk a lot about entitlement and perception and the stories we tell ourselves to make our choices seem right. I told myself a story about you for a long time. It was a story where I was the main character and you were a supporting role whose job was to make my life easier. When you didn't, or when your care felt like pressure, I resented it. I called it a burden because that fit the narrative. It was a cruel thing to do. It was a vicious thing to say. I understand now that you heard me. I understand now what it cost you to hear that. I think I am only beginning to understand what it cost me to say it. The trust for the garden. When you told me, I thought it was the cruelest thing anyone had ever done to me. Now, some mornings, I wake up and I think it might be the fairest. It is a fact. It cannot be argued with. It forces me to look at my own choices because there is nothing of yours left for me to critique or demand. I don't know if you will read this. I don't know if you will care. I am not writing so that you will forgive me. I am writing because I am trying to learn how to be honest, and this is my starting point. Chloe. I read the letter once, then I read it again. I held the paper in my hands and looked out at the garden. A bee hovered near a cluster of lavender. Maria was laughing with another volunteer near the tool shed. The sun warmed the back of my neck. I did not feel a surge of emotion. I felt a quiet, deep recognition. The letter was not an apology. It was a report. A status update from a former province that had declared independence and was now surveying the actual landscape, not the map it had drawn in its head. It was the first sign of adult thinking I had seen from her in a decade. I folded the letter along its original creases. I slipped it back into the envelope. I placed the envelope in the pocket of my work shirt. I stood up and walked back to the pea plants. I finished securing the last loose vine to its trellis. The task required focus and gentle hands. I completed it. Later, at home, I took the envelope from my pocket. I did not reread the letter. I opened the top drawer of my desk, where I kept important documents. I moved aside the file labeled Garden Plans and the one labeled House Trust. I placed the envelope at the back of the drawer. I did not label it. I closed the drawer. I made myself dinner. I ate it while reading a book on native perennials. The house was quiet, but the quiet was no longer an absence. It was a space I inhabited comfortably. The next day at the garden, Leo asked me offhandedly if the mail had been anything important. It was a letter from my daughter, I said, without pausing my work of deadheading spent marigolds. Ah, he said. He was silent for a moment, then asked, "Did it resolve anything?" "It provided information," I said. "It did not require a resolution. That work was already done." He seemed to understand. He changed the subject to the forecast for rain. Weeks passed. The first bank statement arrived, showing the scheduled payment. It was the correct amount, deposited on the correct date. I filed it with the other financial documents. It was a transaction, nothing more. I did not write back, not yet. A response, if one was to be made, would not be a reaction. It would be a considered action, taken on my own timeline for my own reasons. The power to choose when and how to engage was the final and most important piece of my freedom. I was in no hurry. My life had settled into a new pattern. The garden, my home, occasional dinners with Evelyn, the ongoing quiet satisfaction of building and maintaining things that were real and tangible. The past was a closed ledger. The future was a series of mornings in the garden, of hands in the soil, of small, manageable tasks that yielded clear results. I had wanted her to understand the cost of her ingratitude. The letter suggested the understanding had begun. That was all I had ever required. Not her love, not her remorse, but her comprehension. The rest was her journey to make, or not. One afternoon, as I was leaving the garden, I paused by the sign at the entrance, the Resilience Garden. The paint was holding up well. I touched the edge of the wood, feeling its grain. Then I turned and walked to my car. The sun was low in the sky, casting long, golden shadows. I drove home through the quiet streets, at peace with the silence, and with the life I had chosen to build within it.